For this week's study, we will focus on process management, what it does, what it is, and how to use it effectively. I will also yet again draw upon some examples from my own life and career, including the procedural nightmare of my most stressful job, working in the IS Customer Support Center of Tufts Health Plan. Before we explore process management, we need to define what a process is exactly. A process is a group of related tasks with specific inputs and outputs. Process design are tasks to be done and how they are coordinated among functions, people, and organizations. Process strategy is an organization's overall approach for physically producing goods and services. And process planning converts designs into workable instructions for manufacture or delivery. What do we want to do with said processes? We want to make them faster, we want to make them more efficient, we want to make them less costly, and we want to make them more responsive. The next step in process management is determining what kind of process to use based on how your organization operates. Projects are a one-of-a-kind production of a product to a customer order. Batch production can process many different jobs at the same time in groups or batches. Mass production can produce large volumes of a standard product for a mass market, and continuous production is used for very high volume commodity products. The next step is determining a process strategy. Vertical integration is the extent to which firms will produce inputs and control outputs of each stage of the production process. Capital intensity is a mix of capital and labor resources used in production processes. Process flexibility is the ease with which resources can be adjusted in response to changes in demand, technology products, services, and resource availability. Customer involvement is the role of customers in the production process. Now on to actual process management. Business process management is a systematic approach to make an organization's workflow more effective, more efficient, and more capable of adapting to an ever-changing environment. A business process is an activity or set of activities that will accomplish a specific organizational goal. The goal of business process management is to reduce human error and miscommunication and focus stakeholders on requirements of their roles. Business process management is a subset of infrastructure management, an administrative area concerned with maintaining and optimizing an organization's equipment and core operations. There are three kinds of business process management frameworks available in the market today. Horizontal frameworks deal with design and deployment of business processes and are generally focused on technology and reuse. Vertical business project management frameworks focus on a specific set of coordinated tasks and have pre-built templates that can be readily configured and deployed. Full-service business process management suites have 5 basic components. Process discovery and project scoping, process modeling and design, business rules engine, workflow engine, and simulation and testing. A business rules engine is a software component that allows non-programmers to add or change business logic in a business process management system. A business rule is a statement that describes business policy or procedure. Business logic describes the sequence of operations that is associated with data in a database to carry out the rule. A business rules engine works by separating execution code for business rules from the rest of the business process management system. This allows the end user to change business rules without having to ask a programmer for help. When a change is made, the engine will evaluate the change's effect on other rules in the system and flag the user if there's a conflict. Workflow is a series of activities that are necessary to complete a task. Each step in a workflow has a specific step before it and a specific step after it, with the exception of the first step. In a linear workflow, the first step is usually initiated by an outside event. If the workflow has a loop structure, however, the first step is initiated by completion of the last step. Flowcharts and process maps are useful tools for visualizing the number and order of steps in a workflow. Flowcharts are simple geometric symbols and arrows to define if-then relationships. Process maps look somewhat similar, but they may also include support information, documenting the resources that each step in a business process requires. Another aspect of process management which works in accordance with a subject covered in last week's module is process outsourcing. Business process outsourcing is the contracting of a specific business task, such as payroll, to a third-party service provider. Usually business process outsourcing is implemented as a cost-saving measure for tasks that a company requires but does not depend upon to maintain their position in the marketplace. Business process outsourcing is often divided into two categories: back office outsourcing, which includes internal business functions such as billing or purchasing, and front office outsourcing, which includes customer-related services such as marketing or tech support. Business process outsourcing that is contracted outside the company's own country is sometimes called offshore outsourcing. Business process outsourcing that is contracted to a company's neighboring country is sometimes called nearshore outsourcing, and business process outsourcing that is contracted within the company's own county is sometimes called onshore outsourcing. A helpful tool in process management that was mentioned earlier is the flowchart. When building one, there are some important things to consider. You need to determine your objectives, define your process boundaries, define the units of flow, choose the type of chart, observe process and collect data, map out your process, and validate the chart. Here's an example of a flowchart I hastily put together with an app on my cell phone at a bar one night for the IS request process my team of onshore outsourced colleagues and I had to deal with when I worked in the IS Customer Support Center at Tufts Health Plan. So basically it starts with a user making a request to our request portal. Most of the time they didn't choose the correct request, so it got kicked back to us to hunt them down for more information to find out exactly what they wanted. Even if they did choose the correct request, most of the time they didn't provide enough information, once again getting kicked back to us, and we have to get more information out of the user. Chances are we ourselves didn't get the correct information even if it was done correctly, and it would get kicked back to us, and we would need to do it ourselves. If it did happen, the request for approval was put through, and we usually had to wait for that. If it was approved, they got their request, usually in a very time-consuming manner that warranted several phone calls of them calling and yelling at us. And of course, if it wasn't approved, it was rejected, and they would either have to request again, or find some way around it, or just simply give up. Saying our IS request process bottleneck frequently is like saying the Atlantic Ocean is a puddle. There are many complicated instances as to why that was so, ranging from a complicated request interface, not enough adequate training or documentation, no repercussions for users who repeatedly and insistently filled out requests incorrectly, making more work for us, and a breakdown in communication between departments to get this information out to them appropriately. For starters, our request interface was Service Desk Express, which was complicated and antiquated. We planned on switching over to the more user-friendly service now, but had yet to happen upon my departure, and I believe it still has not. Also, better training documentation needs to be implemented for those who make the requests. Making one mistake in the request could potentially halt an already long and busy process, creating more problems, trickling all the way down to a user who can't get their work done and their manager screaming at us for something they screwed up. The problem is that the company already has too much going on and too little time to do it, so nobody will take the time, or even has the time, to provide more intensive and improved training. We also had a number of administrative assistants who were repeatedly warned about this problem and insisted on repeatedly filling out requests incorrectly and not following our suggestions. Some type of punishment or consequence should be put in place for this, but due to the huge interdepartmental communications issues in Tufts corporate culture, managers would be reluctant to admonish their own staff on top of other responsibilities and the fact that they placed all the blame on us. An entire overhaul of the corporate culture would have to take place before any of the aforementioned suggestions even took place. Some tips on how to properly implement business process management in the workplace. Have a business process management excellence center led by a business process management champion. A team needs to be composed of both business and IT experts. The business process management champion needs to believe in business process management, know both business and IT aspects, and be very good at mediating. Because IT and business professionals often speak different languages, it's important that someone is readily available to close the communication gap during the project. Use professional services on your first projects. This will ensure that the initial implementation goes smoothly and that knowledge transfer occurs between consultants and team members. After your first process, you can start to cut down on the dependency of external consultants and only use them for the more critical aspects of the projects. Provide adequate resources to ensure success: technology, time, and budget. Plan for managing product documentation. Make sure the team members review and understand all aspects of the project before starting. Insist on high quality and specific technical documentation from the development team. Include documentation, time, and resources in the budget. Do not take legacy system integrations for granted. Investigate thoroughly and include time for the investigation in the budget. Provide a change management plan for handling modifications to the fundamental requirements or project specifications. Include adequate time and resources for process map quality assurance in the budget. Invest in a thorough and complete project discovery, including well-documented use case scenarios for use in development, Q&A, and troubleshooting. Be vigilant in avoiding scope creep, and take the necessary steps to provide the team with the proper training. Testing business process can be extremely challenging, especially when you know that something is built for change by its very definition. Adding to the complexity, a business process management solution invariably has complex integrations with back-end services. This makes understanding the nuances and recognizing the discipline all the more important. Business process management testing varies from traditional application testing in a number of ways. First and foremost, like the general business process management development approach, the test team should be engaged as part of the initial process discovery. Unlike in traditional application development, where a functional requirements document is handed to, possibly remote, test team to build their test cases. Another important point of difference is the greater stress on testing the impact of new changes on the old in-flight instances. This is not as a common problem in traditional application testing, where regression testing just means ensuring that new functionality has not broken or unchanged functionality. Business process management testing also lays a greater stress on domain knowledge for the test team, and the testing strategy must meet agile development needs. This means that test planning starts on the onset of the project, and test cases can be evolved in complexity as the development iterations progress. For example, initial test case on a user screen may just test simple validation rules and then be evolved to test complex interactions with back-end services. Thus, a business process management test methodology must focus on building a test team that has business domain knowledge and provides a greater driver for organizing test teams across business domains instead of technology domains. It must have a strategy to understand the organization's service repository and organize testing at a service level. A business process management test methodology also needs an appropriate tool strategy to document and automate as much of the testing as possible, especially the backward compatibility, regression, and volume testing aspects. Some points to take away from this. It's important to have a good process management plan in place to ensure your operations run smoothly. Decide what your processes are going to be, select your framework, strategize, implement, and test. As stated on the last slide, testing can be done at the start of the project, so testing can work in accordance with the process's evolved complexity. Processes can also be outsourced if you do so choose, but you have to be careful not to fall into the pitfalls I mentioned in last week's module. Building an effective flowchart in the beginning can create a visual representation on how to structure your processes ahead of time. Try your best to keep as many bottlenecks out of it as possible, and try not to end up like my former employer. During implementation, make sure you have a properly trained leader and team to ensure everything is implemented correctly and effectively. Once all of this is in place, run the proper tests, rinse, and repeat until the process is smooth and to your liking.